The announcement came like a thunderclap, the kind of moment that freezes the world for a heartbeat before setting everything into chaos. The royal family, so often associated with tradition, stability, and careful calculation, had chosen a path that no one truly expected. Archie and Lilibet, the children of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, had been removed from the line of succession. Not sidelined quietly, not shuffled down a few places to keep the focus on William's heirs, but erased from the very lineage that has defined centuries of monarchy. For the millions watching the broadcast or reading the palace's terse statement, it was as though a fissure had ripped through the carefully maintained image of the House of Windsor. For Harry, it was the kind of betrayal that shook the very core of his existence. For Meghan, it was yet another clash in a war she never believed would spiral this far. And for the children, innocent and voiceless, it meant being stripped of the birthright they were told was theirs from the moment they entered the world. This was not just news. It was a moment drenched in symbolism. For a monarchy that has withstood abdications, scandals, wars, divorces, and deaths, to make such a drastic announcement meant something had gone terribly wrong behind closed doors. The phrasing used by King Charles was clinical, yet heavy with implication. Unresolved controversies. Two words that seemed to carry the weight of whispered rumors, lingering suspicions, and unspoken truths that had swirled around Harry and Meghan's children from the very beginning. But why now? Why make this statement in such a public way, with such finality? Those questions became the fuel of debates in newspapers, on television, and across social media platforms where hashtags exploded within minutes of the declaration. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The beginning of this saga isn't found in the announcement itself, but in the years of mounting tension that led up to it. The royal family has always been a stage, its members both actors and symbols in a play that the world insists on watching. When Harry and Meghan stepped away from their roles as senior royals, many believed the worst that could happen was a fractured relationship between brothers, a coldness between father and son, or an ongoing tabloid war. Few anticipated that the monarchy itself might reach across the ocean and take aim at children who never chose this life. Children who had been introduced as symbols of hope and diversity in a monarchy desperate to modernize. That makes the king's decision not just a family matter, but a seismic cultural event. To truly understand why this moment is so gripping, we must step back into the history of the monarchy, where succession has always been both sacred and fragile. The throne has changed hands through bloodlines, but also through manipulation, politics, and in rare cases, outright exclusion. One cannot forget Edward VIII, whose choice of love over duty altered the monarchy forever, or the countless illegitimate heirs who, by virtue of birth outside wedlock, were written out of history despite sharing royal blood. Succession is not merely about who is next, it is about legitimacy, image, and the survival of the institution. Against this backdrop, the removal of Archie and Lilibet cannot be dismissed as a clerical adjustment. It is a deliberate act meant to send a message. The crown chooses who belongs and who does not. But there is another layer that makes this announcement all the more complex. The controversies surrounding Archie and Lilibet have been whispered about since their births. Questions about christenings that were held in secrecy, speculation about birth certificates, and the strange absence of the kind of public appearances that once defined royal childhoods all created a vacuum of information. And into that vacuum poured endless theories, some malicious, others curious, many simply reflective of the public's need for transparency when it comes to the monarchy. To remove the children now, under the banner of unresolved controversies, suggests that the palace itself is acknowledging the cloud of suspicion, even if indirectly. It hands legitimacy to the rumors without clarifying them, leaving the public to speculate endlessly about what is true. Imagine being Harry at that moment, a man who has long defined himself by his rebellion against the very system that raised him. A man haunted by the memory of his mother's tragic death and by the belief that the monarchy, the press, and the institution as a whole had failed to protect her. For him, family has always been both a source of love and of unimaginable pain. To watch his children removed from the royal future must feel like history repeating itself, with innocence sacrificed on the altar of tradition and control. His tears, whether in private or in front of Meghan, would not just be about succession. They would be about loss, powerlessness, and the crushing realization that no matter how far he ran from the palace, its grip could still reach into his home and touch the lives of his children. And then there is Meghan, a woman who entered the royal family with the promise of modernizing influence, only to find herself vilified by sections of the press, ostracized by courtiers, and mistrusted by the establishment. Her journey from actress to duchess, from celebrated bride to controversial exile, has been one of the most dramatic arcs in modern royal history. The removal of her children from the succession is not just an attack on their status, but on her legacy. For her supporters, it will be seen as proof of systemic bias, an institution punishing not just Meghan but the very idea of change she represented. For her critics, it will be framed as the inevitable consequence of her and Harry's choices to step away, to criticize the crown, to profit from their royal connections while abandoning duty. The announcement forces the public to ask difficult questions. Is this justice, a monarchy protecting its integrity against individuals who walked away from their roles? Or is it cruelty, punishing children for the sins, real or perceived, of their parents? Should the line of succession be untouchable, a matter of blood and nothing else? Or does legitimacy in a monarchy extend beyond biology, into behavior, loyalty, and conformity? Each viewer, each citizen, each fan of the royals will grapple with those questions as this story unfolds. The middle of this introduction must dwell on the fallout, the sense that the world is watching a slow-motion collision between two forces, the tradition-bound institution of the monarchy and the rebellious independence of the Sussex family. The king's decision did not just cut off Archie and Lilibet, it forced the entire public to take sides. In the UK, headlines celebrated the monarchy's courage in cleaning up the line of succession. In America, commentators framed it as yet another example of outdated institutions punishing a young, modern family for daring to step outside the lines. Online, the hashtags told their own story. Hashtag Justice for Archie. Hashtag Protect the Children. Hashtag Monarchy Strong. It was not just a royal story anymore. It was a global cultural clash. As the storm builds, the silence from Harry and Meghan becomes deafening. Will they issue a statement? Will Meghan sit down for another tell-all interview? Will Harry pen a sequel despair that takes direct aim at his father's decision? The possibilities hover like dark clouds, each carrying the potential to unleash even greater drama. Every royal watcher, every tabloid, every late-night comedian waits for the moment when the Sussexes will respond. Because if history has taught us anything, it is that Harry and Meghan do not take blows quietly. The end of this introduction must bring us back to the core tension that will drive the rest of this story. Innocence versus power, family versus duty, blood versus institution. At its heart, this is not a tale about titles or places in line. It is a story about belonging. Do Archie and Lilibet belong to the royal family by right of blood, or are they outsiders because of the choices their parents made? Is the monarchy stronger for drawing these hard lines, or weaker because it has revealed the lengths it will go to protect itself? The audience is left on a cliff edge. We know the announcement has been made, but we do not yet know the full consequences. Will this spark a war of words, lawsuits, and new revelations? Will it push Harry and Meghan further away from reconciliation? Or will it expose truths the palace has long tried to bury? These questions hang in the air, unanswered, as we prepare to dive deeper into each chapter of this extraordinary saga. The announcement reverberated across continents, sparking reactions that range from outrage to grim satisfaction. And it is within this storm of voices that the middle of the introduction finds its weight. To many in Britain, the monarchy's decision was long overdue. Why should children raised thousands of miles away in California, surrounded not by royal courtiers, but by Hollywood executives and celebrity friends, have a claim to the most ancient institution in the nation? Yet, across the Atlantic, a different question echoed. Why should children be punished at all? For ordinary Americans, the idea that birthright could be snatched away by decree felt unjust, even cruel. In their eyes, this wasn't just about titles. It was about whether a family was being targeted by an establishment unwilling to forgive their independence. This sharp contrast of perception turned the story into more than a family scandal. It became a debate about culture, fairness, and the meaning of tradition in the modern age. Every royal historian who appeared on television seemed to say the same thing. Succession is the foundation of monarchy. Without clear rules and firm boundaries, the very idea of legitimacy collapses. But even as they spoke with authority, none could hide the unease that lingered behind their carefully chosen words. The king's use of the phrase, unresolved controversies, was not just a vague gesture. It was a loaded statement that pointed back to years of unanswered questions. Why was Archie's birth certificate altered? Why was Lilibet's christening so secretive, shrouded in mystery rather than celebrated publicly like the ceremonies of William's children? Why had the world seen so little of the children compared to other royal offspring? These questions had once belonged to tabloids and conspiracy theorists. Now, by invoking controversy, the monarchy had placed them in the mainstream. For Harry, these questions strike at the heart of his most personal struggles. He has lived his life under scrutiny, and he knows better than most how quickly speculation can turn to myth, and myth to public truth. He watched it happen to his mother, Diana, when whispers about her marriage and love life became part of the public record. And now, he must watch as his children become entangled in the same cycle of suspicion, their innocence overshadowed by doubts planted in the public consciousness. One cannot underestimate the emotional toll this would have on him. A man who has often said that everything he does is for his family, for the chance to break the cycle of trauma, now finds that the cycle has ensnared his own children. And then there is Meghan, who has carried the burden of being an outsider in an institution notorious for its resistance to change. For her, this announcement is not just a slight against her children, but a statement about her place in the monarchy all along. To be told, indirectly, that her children are tainted by controversies is to be told that her bloodline, her influence, her very presence has stained the royal succession. For Meghan's supporters, this is proof of what they have long argued, that the monarchy was never prepared to accept her fully, and by extension, it would never accept her children. For her critics, the announcement validates years of suspicion that Meghan and Harry's choices made it impossible for their children to remain part of the royal future. As the media frenzy builds, the weight of history looms larger. The British monarchy has always survived by adapting to crises, but it has also survived by being ruthless when necessary. Elizabeth I never married to protect her crown. George VI was thrust onto the throne because his brother abandoned it for love. Even Queen Elizabeth II, so often seen as a figure of stability, made decisions that caused lifelong rifts in the family in order to preserve the crown's image. Against that backdrop, Charles's move can be seen as part of a long line of monarchs who chose duty over compassion, institution over family. Yet, unlike in centuries past, every move today is broadcast, dissected, and judged by a global audience that no longer accepts silence as an answer. The gripping middle of this introduction must linger on that tension, the monarchy's need for survival versus the public's demand for transparency. By removing Archie and Lilibet from the line of succession, the monarchy has exposed itself to accusations of cruelty, racism, and hypocrisy, but it has also reinforced its own authority. The question becomes, is authority enough to silence the backlash? Or will the backlash, once ignited, prove impossible to contain? Each headline, each social media post, each conversation at dinner tables across the world adds fuel to the fire. And still, the silence from the Sussexes remains unbroken. This silence is not passive, it is a calculated pause. The world waits for their response because history shows they will not let this go unanswered. The image of Harry in tears, Meghan steeling herself for another battle, and two children caught in the middle lingers like a haunting picture in the minds of those watching. Some expect a fiery interview, others a lawsuit, others still a carefully worded statement that places blame squarely at the feet of the palace. The uncertainty only heightens the drama, because everyone knows that whatever Harry and Meghan say will shape the narrative for years to come. The end of this introduction must bring the viewer to the edge of the storm. The facts are simple. Two children have been stripped of their place in history by a monarch determined to protect his institution. But the implications are anything but simple. This is not merely about Archie and Lilibet. It is about whether a monarchy that claims to represent unity and continuity can survive when it chooses exclusion over inclusion, secrecy over openness, and tradition over compassion. It is about whether Harry and Meghan can withstand yet another blow, or whether this moment will finally fracture their bond beyond repair. And it is about the future of the crown itself, an institution that must now answer to a world that refuses to accept silence and shadows as explanations. On the morning the announcement was released, a day that will be remembered not for ceremony or celebration, but for the way it stripped away layers of illusion about the monarchy. The statement was brief, only a handful of carefully measured sentences, but its effect was immediate and profound. The palace's communications team had timed it with precision, choosing an hour when both the British and American news cycles would be active, ensuring that the message would dominate headlines across the globe. It arrived without warning, no leaks in advance, no rumors in the tabloids to prepare the public. That silence made the blow even harder when it landed. Within minutes, breaking news banners flashed across television screens, phones lit up with notifications, and broadcasters interrupted regular programming to repeat the words that seemed almost unbelievable. Archie and Lilibet, the children of Prince Harry and Meghan, would no longer be recognized in the royal line of succession. The manner of delivery was as calculated as the content. King Charles himself was not shown on screen, nor was there a press conference where reporters could fire off questions. Instead, it was an official communiqué from Buckingham Palace, stamped with the royal arms, its wording so stark that it raised more questions than it answered. It was the kind of document that seemed cold in its detachment, as though the lives of two children were being handled like a routine adjustment in a corporate hierarchy. And yet behind its polished phrasing lay centuries of tradition, authority, and an institution reminding the world that it could, with a few lines, alter the destiny of its members. For the journalists who had long covered the royal beat, this moment was unlike anything they had seen before. Not even the abdication crisis of Edward VIII carried quite the same resonance in the modern era, where information travels in real time and scrutiny is relentless. By midday, every major news outlet had dispatched analysts to decode the meaning. Was this about protecting the monarchy from the chaos of Harry and Meghan's independent life in America? Was it a reaction to the mounting scandals and rumors surrounding the children? Or was it a message to Harry himself, punishing him for the years of criticism he had aimed at his family? Each outlet had its own spin, but they all agreed on one thing. The timing and severity of the announcement made it clear that this was no ordinary adjustment. The shockwaves extended far beyond newsrooms. On social media, hashtags erupted almost instantly. Within an hour, hashtag Archie and Lilibet, hashtag Royal Succession, and hashtag Protect the Children were trending worldwide. In Britain, many voices applauded the monarchy for restoring order, framing the decision as a necessary step to preserve dignity and tradition. In America, however, the tone was far more critical. Commentators questioned how an ancient institution could justify penalizing children who had no role in their parents' decisions. Memes and fiery posts circulated with captions like, "Children aren't pawns," and "How far will the monarchy go to protect itself?" The divide was unmistakable, turning what should have been a family matter into a global cultural clash. Behind closed doors, one imagines the reaction within the Sussex household was far from silent. Harry, who had long expressed his deep mistrust of the palace machine, must have felt a mix of rage and despair. His memoir had already laid bare his grievances with his father and brother, but this went beyond personal slights. This was his children, his legacy, being stripped away. For Meghan, the sting would have been sharper still. To her supporters, this was the confirmation of what she had always warned, that the institution was hostile to her and, by extension, to her children. It was not just a denial of titles or positions. It was a declaration that her family, despite its blood ties, would never truly be part of the monarchy's future. To fully grasp the scale of the announcement, one must look at the context in which it came. The monarchy had endured years of turbulence. Harry and Meghan's explosive interviews, their exit from royal duties, and their increasingly public battles with the press. While William and Kate represented stability and continuity, Harry and Meghan embodied disruption and controversy. The decision to remove their children from succession was not just about those children, but about the balance of the monarchy itself. It was as if the king was drawing a line in the sand, reaffirming which branch of the family represented the crown's future and which had become a liability. The British public, conditioned to expect the monarchy to act with restraint, found itself split. Some argued that the decision, while harsh, was a necessary reaffirmation of order. Others saw it as a cruel betrayal of two children who had done nothing wrong. For those old enough to remember the days after Princess Diana's death, echoes of history rang uncomfortably loud. Back then, the monarchy was criticized for its coldness, for failing to show humanity in the face of tragedy. Now, decades later, many wondered if history was repeating itself, if the monarchy had once again chosen protocol and image over compassion and family. The symbolism of the announcement could not be overstated. Succession has always been more than a list of names. It is a statement of legitimacy, a declaration of who belongs to the crown's future and who does not. By erasing Archie and Lilibet, the monarchy had not just adjusted the line, but had essentially declared that some controversies, whether spoken or unspoken, were too great to overlook. In doing so, they opened the floodgates of speculation. Was this about questions of legitimacy? About the secrecy surrounding births and christenings? Or was it simply punishment for Harry and Meghan's defiance? The palace, in its silence beyond the initial statement, left the world to speculate freely. What makes this chapter so dramatic is not only the announcement itself, but the vacuum it created. In that vacuum, rumors thrived, debates raged, and emotions ran high. The press dissected every word of the statement. Body language experts pored over images of Charles from recent appearances, and commentators tried to guess how William might have influenced the decision. Theories multiplied. Some claimed it was a strategic move to protect the monarchy from future scandals. Others insisted it was a deeply personal act of revenge. Each theory fed into the sense that this was not merely a procedural adjustment, but the eruption of long-simmering tensions. As the day wore on, the gravity of the moment sank deeper into the public consciousness. People debated it at work, at school, in cafes and pubs. Every family had an opinion, because this was not just about royals. It was about children, about justice, about fairness. What right does an institution have to decide the destiny of children born into it? Should tradition outweigh compassion? Is the monarchy a family first or an institution first? These questions, left unresolved, became the heartbeat of the story. And in the middle of all this, the image of Harry and Meghan loomed large. Would they fight back? Would they issue a fiery rebuttal, take to the airwaves, or even pursue legal action? Or would they remain silent, calculating their next move with the knowledge that whatever they said would echo across the world? That uncertainty only magnified the drama, ensuring that the announcement would not fade into the background but would instead dominate the global stage for weeks, months, perhaps even years to come. As the shock of the announcement settled into something heavier, the sheer scale of its consequences began to unfurl. The monarchy has always operated with a carefully crafted balance of symbolism and power, knowing that every gesture, every decree, every silence is interpreted by millions. In this case, the absence of explanation was as striking as the announcement itself. The line, due to unresolved controversies, acted like a match dropped into dry straw. Those 3 words alone ensured that speculation would not only continue but intensify. It was as if the palace had invited the public to draw their own conclusions, to fill in the gaps with their own narratives, knowing full well that once such questions are unleashed, they can never be fully contained. For many, the lack of transparency felt deliberate. If the monarchy had hard evidence of wrongdoing, why not present it openly? If this was about Harry and Meghan's decision to step back from their roles, why punish the children? The ambiguity was maddening, and in that ambiguity, suspicion thrived. It was as though the monarchy wanted to assert authority without taking on the responsibility of accountability. That silence made the announcement more chilling, because it suggested there were things too explosive to be spoken aloud. Imagine the atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace as the statement was released. A flurry of aides and advisors. Drafts were written until every syllable was stripped of emotion, courtiers ensuring that nothing in the wording could be legally challenged. Behind the polished facade, though, there must have been tension, an understanding that this was not just another press release. This was a moment that would define Charles's reign, a decision that would reverberate for generations. And yet, they pressed forward, choosing control over caution, finality over dialogue. On the streets of London, reactions ranged from hushed conversations to outright debates. In pubs, people leaned over their pints, voicing opinions that mirrored the divisions of the nation. Some spoke with admiration for Charles, praising him for finally taking a firm stance in the face of years of turmoil caused by Harry and Meghan's choices. Others shook their heads, seeing it as proof that the monarchy was as cold and unfeeling as ever. For younger generations, who had grown up in an age of transparency and inclusivity, the decision felt archaic, almost medieval, a reminder that the monarchy still clung to values that seemed increasingly out of touch with modern society. The global press amplified these voices, layering them with their own narratives. American talk shows painted the Sussexes as victims of an outdated system, while British tabloids ran bold headlines declaring the monarchy's triumph over rebellion. On one side of the Atlantic, sympathy swelled for the children. On the other, there was a sense of vindication, a belief that the monarchy had at last reasserted its dominance. This divergence of opinion revealed something deeper. The monarchy struggled to exist not just as a British institution, but as a global symbol scrutinized by diverse cultures with conflicting values. Within this swirling chaos, Harry's emotional reality becomes central. For a man who had always been defined by his role as the spare, the decision to remove his children must have felt like a wound deeper than any he had previously endured. He had stepped away to protect them, to give them freedom from the relentless machinery of the monarchy, and yet the monarchy had reached across the ocean to take something precious from them anyway. The tears he shed, whether in anger, grief, or a mix of both, were the tears of a man watching history repeat itself. His children were now at the mercy of the same system he had fought so desperately to escape. And Meghan's perspective cannot be overlooked. For her, the decision was not just about titles or succession. It was about identity, about belonging, about the cruel reminder that no matter how much she gave, she and her children would never truly be embraced by the institution she had once married into. To be told, implicitly, that her children were controversial was to be told that her presence in the family had tainted them. That realization would harden her resolve, perhaps even sharpen her desire to fight back, because for Meghan, this was not just an institutional decision. It was personal. The first day after the announcement was filled with unanswered questions, but one truth became undeniable. The monarchy had chosen confrontation over reconciliation. By making such a drastic and public decision, it had left no room for quiet compromises or backroom negotiations. The king's message was clear, and its delivery ensured that Harry and Meghan could not ignore it. Silence from them would be seen as weakness. Anger would be seen as defiance. Whatever they did next, the narrative had already been set. A battle was underway, and the world was watching. By evening, television networks were already airing retrospectives of past royal crises, drawing comparisons between Charles's move and pivotal moments in history. Clips of Edward VIII, archival footage of Princess Diana, and even discussions of the abdication crisis were woven together with shots of Harry and Meghan's wedding, their Oprah interview, and their life in California. The message was implicit. This was not just a minor adjustment to royal protocol. This was a seismic event that belonged in the canon of great royal upheavals. And yet, amidst the analysis and commentary, ordinary people felt a sense of unease. If two innocent children could be erased from history with the stroke of a pen, what did that say about the monarchy's humanity? Was the crown truly a family, or was it an institution willing to sacrifice anyone in the pursuit of survival? That question, unspoken yet deeply felt, lingered long after the day's headlines faded into the night. With the words that reverberated the loudest from the king's statement, unresolved controversies. These two words alone transformed what could have been seen as a bureaucratic adjustment into an explosive public spectacle. By choosing not to clarify, not to specify, not to deny or confirm any single rumor, the monarchy essentially confirmed all of them in the public imagination. Controversy became the defining label for Archie and Lilibet, children too young to defend themselves, yet thrust into a narrative woven out of speculation, suspicion, and silence. The phrase immediately called back to the earliest days of Meghan's pregnancies, when questions swirled about secrecy and transparency. In the case of Archie, confusion began with the birth certificate. First issued with Meghan's full name, it was later altered to remove her forenames and list her simply as Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. Though explained as a clerical adjustment, many saw it as a deliberate act, a symbol of the monarchy's unwillingness to let Meghan stand on equal footing with other royal mothers. That minor change planted seeds of doubt, and in the years that followed, those seeds blossomed into full-grown questions. Why was Archie's christening closed to the public, with no press allowed and only carefully selected photos released afterward? Why were details of his godparents withheld when the tradition of revealing them had been upheld for generations? Why was there so little visibility of the child in a family whose very identity relies on public appearances? Then came Lilibet, whose birth was announced from across the Atlantic, not in the hallowed halls of St. Mary's Hospital in London, but in a California clinic. To some, this was a simple matter of the couple living their new life in America. To others, it was evidence of distance, secrecy, and perhaps even fabrication. The christening of Lilibet was equally puzzling. Unlike the grand ceremonies of William's children, hers was reportedly held in private, with conflicting accounts about who attended, what rituals were observed, and whether royal traditions had been followed at all. Photographs were scarce, details vague, and speculation rampant. It was into this vacuum of uncertainty that the most unsettling rumors crept. Whispers that Archie and Lilibet were not presented to the public because they were not truly present in the ways the public expected. The so-called doll theory gained traction online, fueled by grainy photos and awkward appearances where some claimed the children looked stiff or unreal. While most dismissed such claims as outlandish, the lack of transparency from the Sussexes and the silence from the palace allowed these narratives to thrive. The monarchy, by using the term unresolved controversies, effectively gave these whispers new life. It was no longer just tabloids and fringe corners of the internet speculating. The palace had now framed those very uncertainties as the reason for removing the children from the line of succession. This decision raises an uncomfortable question. If the controversies could have been resolved, why weren't they? Was it that Harry and Meghan refused to comply with traditional processes, such as allowing public christenings and verifiable documentation? Or was it that the palace itself found certain truths inconvenient, preferring to let silence stand in place of explanation? Either possibility points to a failure, either of communication, of trust, or of integrity. The monarchy's strength has always been its ability to project stability. Yet here was a case where stability was undermined not by scandal alone, but by ambiguity, a void where answers should have been. For the public, the controversies were not just about the children, but about what they symbolized. In a family defined by bloodlines, transparency is not optional. It is the currency of legitimacy. Every child born into the monarchy is not just a baby, but a future face of the institution, their very existence proof of continuity. By cloaking Archie and Lilibet's lives in secrecy, Harry and Meghan challenged that unwritten contract between the royals and the public. Supporters argue that this secrecy was necessary to protect their children from the ruthless scrutiny that has destroyed lives before. Critics counter that by denying visibility, the Sussexes eroded the very foundation of royal trust. Both views have merit, but in the end, the controversy itself was enough to fracture the illusion of unity. One must also consider the role of timing. Why now, after years of speculation, did the palace decide to invoke these controversies publicly? It suggests that the monarchy had reached a breaking point. With the line of succession already secure through William and his children, the need to retain Harry's children became less about necessity and more about optics. If the presence of Archie and Lilibet invited questions that threatened the monarchy's image, perhaps the easiest solution was to remove them altogether, allowing the focus to remain on those children who were beyond dispute. The phrase, unresolved controversies, also reveals something about Charles as king. Known throughout his life for his desire to modernize and adapt the monarchy, Charles now shows that he is also willing to be ruthless in protecting it. This decision was not just about the children. It was about drawing a line in the sand, making it clear that ambiguity has no place in the future of the crown. In doing so, he risked alienating his son and daughter-in-law permanently, but he may have calculated that the damage of exclusion was less than the damage of ongoing suspicion. For Harry and Meghan, the words cut deeper than any headline. To have their children labeled as controversial is not just an institutional slight. It is an attack on their family's legitimacy. To the outside world, it confirms what Meghan has long argued, that she and her children would never be fully accepted by the institution. To Harry, it is a devastating reminder that no matter how much he loves his family, the monarchy will always prioritize itself over him. The controversies were never just about paperwork or ceremonies. They were about belonging, about whether his children truly counted in the eyes of the family he was born into. The world, watching this unfold, is left to grapple with the implications. Was the monarchy right to prioritize certainty over compassion? Or has it crossed a line, turning rumor into justification, punishing children for mysteries that were never of their making? Each unanswered question becomes another piece of evidence, another point of contention. And because the palace has chosen silence, the questions multiply rather than fade. The end of this chapter rests on the idea that controversies, once named, can never again be dismissed. By invoking them so directly, the monarchy has ensured that they will define Archie and Lilibet's place in history, whether the truth is ever revealed or not. The children are no longer just Harry and Meghan's. They are symbols, living embodiments of a debate about legitimacy, transparency, and the future of the monarchy itself. And as long as those controversies remain unresolved, the shadow they cast will linger over every decision, every appearance, every word spoken by both the palace and the Sussexes in the years to come. With a truth as old as the monarchy itself, succession is the backbone of royal authority. Without a clear line of who comes next, the monarchy ceases to be an institution and becomes a stage for chaos. Every king and queen since William the Conqueror has understood that legitimacy rests not just on power, but on bloodline and recognition. That is why the removal of Archie and Lilibet from the succession list is not a trivial decision. It strikes at the very heart of what the monarchy claims to be, an unbroken chain of lineage stretching back centuries. To fully understand the weight of Charles's decision, one must place it against the backdrop of history, where succession crises have toppled dynasties, reshaped nations, and left legacies that endure even today. Consider the abdication crisis of 1936. Edward VIII, once the king, gave up the throne to Mary Wallis Simpson, a woman deemed unsuitable by the establishment. His choice created a rupture in the monarchy, thrusting his brother, George VI, into a role he had never prepared for. That moment redefined the line of succession and, in turn, altered the entire trajectory of the House of Windsor. The crown passed to Elizabeth II and eventually to Charles, all because of a decision made nearly a century ago. The echoes of that crisis remind us that succession is never just a list of names. It is a living drama, capable of reshaping the institution forever. Archie and Lilibet's removal may not have the same immediate political impact, but symbolically it belongs to the same lineage of seismic moments. It says to the world that the monarchy is willing to intervene, to redraw lines, to exclude when necessary. In past centuries, bastards were denied recognition, rival claimants locked away in towers, and questions of legitimacy resolved with bloodshed. In today's age, the tools are softer: statements, press releases, subtle shifts on the royal website, but the outcome is no less final. When the monarchy decides you do not belong, history records it as truth. To many observers, this raises a profound question. What does belonging mean in a monarchy built on blood? If blood alone is not enough to secure a place in the line of succession, then what is? Is it behavior? Loyalty? Conformity to tradition? These questions reach far beyond Harry and Meghan's children. They strike at the monarchy's own claim to authority. For if legitimacy can be granted or withdrawn based on unresolved controversies, then legitimacy itself becomes a political tool rather than a divine right. The weight of tradition, however, cannot be underestimated. Royal families throughout Europe have guarded their succession lines with ferocity because they know instability invites ruin. When Henry VIII failed to secure a male heir, his desperation tore England from the Catholic Church, plunging the nation into upheaval. When Elizabeth I died childless, the crown passed to a new dynasty, the Stuarts, forever altering England's path. The Glorious Revolution of 1688 was itself a succession crisis, removing James II and replacing him with William and Mary because the nation refused to accept a Catholic heir. These examples reveal a pattern. The crown survives not by sentiment, but by ruthless protection of succession. Against this history, Charles's decision to erase Archie and Lilibet is not unprecedented. It is a continuation of the monarchy's willingness to sacrifice individuals for stability. And yet, in the 21st century, the optics of such ruthlessness are far more damaging. In a world that prizes inclusion, compassion, and transparency, the monarchy's old instincts clash with modern values. When William's children are celebrated with public ceremonies and glossy photographs, while Harry's are erased with a cold statement, the contrast could not be starker. The monarchy may be protecting itself in the short term, but in doing so, it risks appearing heartless, selective, even discriminatory. The very traditions meant to preserve legitimacy now threaten to undermine it in the eyes of a global audience. This contradiction raises another layer of complexity. Succession has always been sacred, but it has also always been political. It is about controlling the narrative as much as securing the bloodline. By removing Archie and Lilibet, the monarchy is not simply erasing names. It is rewriting the story of its future. William's children become the undisputed faces of continuity, while Harry's children are relegated to footnotes. This is more than family drama. It is the monarchy shaping how history will remember them. For Harry, this is a devastating reminder of his role as the spare. Throughout his life, he has spoken of the pain of living in the shadow of the heir, of knowing that his place was always secondary. Now that pain extends to his children, who have been told in no uncertain terms that they are expendable. The line of succession is not just an abstract list, it is a hierarchy of worth. To remove Archie and Lilibet is to declare that they are not essential to the crown's future, that their blood is not enough. This cuts against everything Harry has fought for, the idea that his family could carve out its own destiny while still being recognized as part of the monarchy's story. For Meghan, the symbolism is equally brutal. Her marriage into the royal family was hailed at first as a sign of progress, of modernity, of inclusivity. Yet the erasure of her children from the succession suggests that progress has limits, that the institution's embrace is conditional. It is not hard to imagine the anger this would spark in her, a confirmation of what she has long suspected, that no matter how hard she tried, she and her children would always be outsiders. To her supporters, this decision is not about controversies or tradition, but about control, about silencing a branch of the family that dared to defy the rules. The broader public sees in this decision a mirror of their own debates about tradition and modernity. Should an ancient institution like the monarchy be allowed to operate on rules that seem cruel by contemporary standards? Or is its very survival dependent on such rules? To the defenders of the crown, this is about protecting the integrity of the institution. To its critics, it is proof that the monarchy is out of step with the times. Either way, the decision has ensured that Archie and Lilibet's names will be remembered not for what they achieved, but for what they were denied. Its gaze across the Atlantic, away from the solemn corridors of Buckingham Palace and into the bright, sprawling world of California, where Harry and Meghan sought to build a new life. When the couple made their bombshell announcement in early 2020 that they would step back from royal duties, they framed it as a decision rooted in love and survival. They wanted to escape the relentless glare of the British press, the suffocating traditions of palace life, and the constant reminders of hierarchy that left Harry forever cast as the spare. America represented freedom, an opportunity to raise their children in relative privacy while carving out careers on their own terms. Yet from the moment their plane touched down in Los Angeles, critics argued that their departure was not simply a retreat from royal duties, but a calculated step toward commercial gain. The American dream that Harry and Meghan pursued was packaged through media deals, brand collaborations, and a highly publicized partnership with Netflix. These ventures promised to give them both financial independence and global influence, allowing them to tell their own story without the filter of palace courtiers. Their supporters saw these moves as empowering, a couple breaking free from an outdated system and creating their own legacy. But detractors viewed the same actions as opportunistic, a betrayal of duty dressed up as personal liberation. Every deal, every interview, every public appearance fed the narrative that the Sussexes were more interested in Hollywood fame than royal responsibility. Archie and Lilibet, though rarely seen, became central symbols of this American life. Their privacy was fiercely guarded, with only carefully chosen images released at specific times. Family portraits were unveiled on special occasions, often through slickly produced media rather than traditional royal photo calls. While this approach gave the Sussexes control over their family's image, it also widened the gap between them and the traditions they had left behind. In Britain, where the public had grown accustomed to watching royal children grow up in the spotlight, the secrecy around Harry's children became yet another source of tension. It was easy for critics to accuse the couple of trying to have it both ways, enjoying the status of royalty while refusing the obligations of visibility. The Netflix deal became the crown jewel of their American dream. The documentaries and projects promised to tell stories of resilience, courage, and social change. Yet, they also opened the door for deeper scrutiny. When the couple released their 6-part docuseries, it was both a triumph and a controversy. Supporters applauded the raw honesty, the behind-the-scenes look at their struggles, and their willingness to confront the monarchy's darker side. Critics dismissed it as self-indulgent, an airing of grievances designed to make money off their royal connections. In the court of public opinion, the line between authenticity and exploitation blurred, and once again, Archie and Lilibet's absence in these narratives only heightened suspicion. If this was about telling their family's truth, why were the children still shielded from view? Meghan's ventures into publishing added another layer. Her children's book, The Bench, was inspired by Harry's bond with Archie, painting a tender picture of fatherhood and love. While warmly received by some, it was savaged by others as overly simplistic and opportunistic. In the eyes of critics, every creative effort became a reminder that Meghan and Harry had traded duty for commerce. Their life in California, surrounded by celebrities and executives, seemed a world away from the quiet dignity expected of royals. This growing perception that they were exploiting their titles while rejecting their responsibilities fueled resentment back in Britain and gave ammunition to those who questioned the legitimacy of keeping their children in the line of succession. The American dream was not without its personal costs. Harry, who had grown up in the rigid but protective structure of the monarchy, often appeared torn between relief and homesickness. In interviews, he admitted to missing aspects of his old life, even as he embraced the new. Meghan, more at ease in the world of media and celebrity, leaned into the opportunities, crafting a brand that blended activism with visibility. The contrast between them, subtle at first, became more noticeable over time, and whispers of strain within the marriage occasionally surfaced. The removal of Archie and Lilibet from succession only added to this tension. For Meghan, it was proof that the monarchy would never forgive their departure. For Harry, it was a reminder that no matter how far he tried to run, the shadow of the crown would always find him. The symbolism of their California home also plays a part in this chapter. Montecito, with its sprawling mansions and celebrity neighbors, became a physical manifestation of the divide. For supporters, it was a sanctuary where Harry and Meghan could raise their children away from danger. For critics, it was evidence of hypocrisy. A couple who claimed to flee intrusion yet settled in one of the most photographed enclaves in America. This contradiction only deepened the sense that their American dream was at odds with the responsibilities they had abandoned. Archie and Lilibet, again, stood at the center of it all. Raised outside the institution, their upbringing contrasted sharply with that of George, Charlotte, and Louis, who were woven into the fabric of British tradition from birth. Where William's children attended carefully chosen schools and performed public duties from a young age, Harry's children lived behind gates, seen only when their parents chose. This difference was more than a personal choice. It was a statement about what kind of life Harry and Meghan wanted for their family. But in the eyes of the monarchy, it also underscored the gap between duty and independence, between belonging and exile. The American Dream chapter is not complete without acknowledging the fierce divide it created in public opinion. In the United States, Harry and Meghan were often celebrated as trailblazers, a modern couple who dared to defy an ancient system. They found friends among celebrities, allies and activists, and a platform in media willing to embrace their story. In Britain, however, the same actions were often framed as betrayal. The press portrayed them as absentees, unwilling to fulfill the roles expected of them, yet still clinging to titles and privileges. This split in perception reinforced the controversy that ultimately culminated in the king's announcement. For some, it was inevitable. You cannot abandon the monarchy and still expect its rewards. For others, it was punitive. Why should children suffer for the choices of their parents? As this chapter draws to its conclusion, the American dream that Harry and Meghan pursued appears both triumphant and tragic. They gained independence, wealth, and influence, but in doing so, they widened the chasm between themselves and the crown. The decision to remove Archie and Lilibet from succession was not made in a vacuum. It was shaped by every deal, every interview, every photograph withheld. The monarchy looked at the life the Sussexes built and decided it was incompatible with the traditions of succession. On the quiet irony that while Archie and Lilibet have been shielded from the public eye more than any modern royal children, they have nonetheless become two of the most discussed figures in the monarchy. From the moment Archie was born, he was a subject of fascination and division. His birth was not announced in the usual fashion with a hospital appearance and a proud royal couple standing on the steps with their newborn. Instead, Meghan and Harry opted for a far more private affair, announcing his arrival only after Meghan had returned home. For a public accustomed to being included in these royal milestones, the departure from tradition was jarring. Questions followed immediately. Why the secrecy? Why the break from custom? And what did it mean for the monarchy's relationship with the public? The secrecy did not end there. Archie's christening was shrouded in privacy, held at Windsor Castle with only a handful of selected guests and no press allowed. In contrast, the christenings of William's children had been public spectacles, rich in symbolism and tradition, reassuring the public of continuity. The refusal to share details, including the names of Archie's godparents, struck many as a breach of trust. It was not just about a religious ceremony. It was about the monarchy's unspoken contract with the people, that they would be allowed to witness and celebrate the milestones of those destined, however distantly, to inherit the throne. By denying access, Harry and Meghan invited speculation. What were they hiding? Why were they so determined to keep their child out of sight? When Lilibet was born in California, the secrecy deepened. She arrived into the world far from the traditions of London hospitals and royal photo calls, and her christening was just as private as her brother's. Conflicting reports about whether members of the royal family had attended fueled endless debates. The choice to name her after the late Queen's intimate childhood nickname was both a gesture of affection and, to some, a calculated move. Critics accused Harry and Meghan of exploiting the Queen's legacy to strengthen their children's royal identity while simultaneously keeping them away from royal traditions. Supporters argued that the name was a tribute, proof that despite their distance, they still valued their ties to the monarchy. The ambiguity of their decisions only heightened the controversy. The children's lack of visibility became a defining feature of their lives. Rarely seen in public, they appeared only in carefully curated photographs, often released on special occasions. The images, sometimes professionally staged, contrasted sharply with the candid, open displays of William's children. While this was consistent with Harry and Meghan's desire for privacy, it also left room for rumors to grow. Theories about their existence, their appearances, and even their legitimacy circulated in tabloids and online forums. The refusal to engage with these rumors only fed them further, turning the children into unwilling participants in a narrative they could not control. The controversy was compounded by the way Harry and Meghan spoke about their children in interviews. In their sit-down with Oprah Winfrey, Meghan revealed that concerns had been raised within the royal family about Archie's skin color before his birth. The revelation shocked the world, sparking accusations of racism within the monarchy and reigniting debates about the institution's relevance in a diverse modern society. For supporters, this was proof that Archie's treatment had been shaped by prejudice. For critics, it was seen as a damaging claim that further widened the rift between Harry, Meghan, and the crown. In either case, the child's identity was no longer just personal. It was political, symbolic of larger battles over race, tradition, and inclusion. The controversies surrounding the children extended beyond their treatment by the palace. Their titles, or lack thereof, became another battleground. When Charles ascended the throne, Archie and Lilibet became entitled to be styled as prince and princess under existing royal conventions. Yet confusion lingered over whether those titles would be formally recognized or used. For months, the uncertainty fueled debates about legitimacy and belonging. When the titles were finally acknowledged, it seemed a temporary resolution, but the king's recent announcement rendered it moot. By removing them from the line of succession, Charles effectively stripped away the very recognition that had been so fiercely debated. The mystery surrounding Archie and Lilibet also took on a generational dimension. Royal children are often the glue that binds the monarchy to its people, humanizing an institution that can otherwise seem distant. From Elizabeth and Margaret's childhoods during the war to William and Harry's public appearances with Diana, royal children have long served as symbols of continuity and relatability. By contrast, Archie and Lilibet's absence created a vacuum. Rather than uniting people, their invisibility divided them. Instead of reassurance, they became a source of suspicion. The monarchy thrives on visibility, but Harry and Meghan's children embodied the opposite, and that tension lay at the heart of their controversies. One cannot overlook the effect this had on William's children. George, Charlotte, and Louis grew up in full view of the world, their lives carefully managed but never hidden. Their christenings, birthdays, and first days at school became public events, moments of shared joy that reinforced the monarchy's place in national life. The contrast with Archie and Lilibet was stark. Where William's children represented continuity, Harry's children symbolized disruption. Where one set of children reassured the public of the monarchy's future, the other raised questions about whether they even belonged in that future. For Harry, the controversies surrounding his children were deeply personal wounds. His determination to protect them from the press was rooted in his trauma over his mother's death and the role he believed the media played in it. He wanted to shield Archie and Lilibet from the relentless exposure that had haunted his own childhood. But in doing so, he inadvertently made them more mysterious, more open to speculation. His choices, while understandable, clashed with the expectations of the monarchy and the public, fueling the very controversies he hoped to avoid. For Meghan, the controversies were proof of her worst fears, that her children would be judged, questioned, and diminished because of who she was. Every debate about their visibility, their titles, and their legitimacy was, to her, an extension of the hostility she had endured within the royal family and the British press. Protecting them was not just a parental instinct. It was a defense against an institution that she believed would never accept them. As this chapter reaches its conclusion, it is clear that the controversies surrounding Archie and Lilibet were not just accidents of circumstance, but products of choices, secrecy, and deep cultural divides. The monarchy's decision to invoke those controversies as grounds for removing them from succession crystallized years of tension into a single act. For the children, it meant being defined not by who they are, but by what they represent: mystery, division, and unresolved questions. Chapter 6 begins with the sound of two worlds colliding. On one side, Meghan's defenders, Hollywood friends, American allies, social media movements. And on the other, the loyalists of the palace, who see themselves as guardians of tradition and stability. The announcement that Archie and Lilibet were removed from the line of succession did not just pit one family against itself. It sparked a cultural war of narratives. This battle has defined the Sussex saga from the beginning, but never before had it been so starkly drawn. The decision handed ammunition to both camps. For Meghan's supporters, it was proof of cruelty, evidence that the institution was determined to punish her and her children. For royal loyalists, it was vindication, the long-awaited correction of a mistake, an acknowledgement that those who step away from duty cannot expect the rewards of the crown. Meghan's defenders wasted no time. Prominent voices in Hollywood began hinting, both privately and publicly, that the monarchy's decision was rooted in bias. Activists pointed back to Meghan's claim during the Oprah interview that there had been conversations within the royal family about the color of Archie's skin before he was born. That revelation, shocking at the time, now felt like the unspoken truth behind the unresolved controversies mentioned in the king's statement. Social media campaigns reignited overnight, hashtags accusing the monarchy of racism trending once more. For Meghan's supporters, the removal of her children from succession was not about tradition or protocol. It was about prejudice, plain and simple. Across the ocean, royal loyalists responded with equal fervor. Newspapers in the UK ran editorials applauding Charles for taking a firm stance, arguing that the monarchy had to protect itself from individuals who had turned their backs on duty. Commentators repeated the mantra that titles and succession are not entitlements but privileges, ones earned by service and loyalty. In their view, Meghan and Harry had squandered those privileges when they left, when they criticized the family, when they signed multi-million-dollar deals to tell their side of the story. To allow their children to remain in the line of succession, they argued, would undermine the dignity of the crown. In this framing, the decision was not punishment but correction. Caught in the middle of these two forces was the public, struggling to make sense of competing truths. On one hand, the image of children being stripped of their place in history felt cruel, a punishment for sins not their own. On the other, the argument that the monarchy is built on duty, not personal ambition, resonated with those who believe its survival depends on discipline. The divide grew deeper, more bitter, because each side saw the issue not just as a family dispute, but as a symbol of larger battles. Modernity versus tradition, diversity versus exclusivity, independence versus duty. Meghan herself became the lightning rod for this divide. In the eyes of her defenders, she was a woman who dared to challenge an outdated system, and who paid the price through the exclusion of her children. Every attack on her was interpreted as an attack on progress, on women of color, on the idea that the monarchy could ever evolve. In the eyes of loyalists, however, Meghan was the architect of her own downfall, a manipulator who had used the monarchy as a platform to advance her brand, and then turned on it when it no longer served her. The removal of Archie and Lilibet, in this view, was the inevitable consequence of Meghan's choices. Harry's role in this divide is more complex. To Meghan's defenders, he is the grieving son who lost his mother to the very pressures he is now trying to protect his family from. His decision to step away, they argue, was an act of bravery, a refusal to let history repeat itself. To loyalists, however, Harry is the weak link, a prince manipulated into abandoning his family, a man who chose love over duty at the cost of his birthright. The announcement, then, was not just about Meghan or her children, but about Harry himself. Was he the victim of an unfeeling institution, or was he the author of his own misfortune? The clash between Meghan's defenders and palace loyalists also played out in the media. American outlets framed the story in terms of personal injustice, focusing on the children and the emotional toll. British outlets, by contrast, leaned into themes of tradition, stability, and the monarchy's survival. The same event was described in radically different ways, shaping public opinion depending on which side of the Atlantic one stood. In this sense, Archie and Lilibet became more than children. They became symbols of a global divide in how people view monarchy itself. The online space magnified this battle. The so-called Sussex Squad, a devoted group of Meghan's supporters, launched campaigns defending her children, framing them as innocent victims of institutional cruelty. They flooded social media with messages of solidarity, reminding the world of Meghan's struggles and drawing connections between her treatment and broader issues of systemic bias. On the other side, royal loyalists and critics of the Sussexes pushed back, painting the children's removal as overdue justice. The debates were not polite exchanges but brutal clashes, with insults, accusations, and conspiracy theories flying in every direction. What should have been a family matter became a global shouting match, with millions of strangers taking sides. This chapter also highlights the danger of such polarization. The monarchy, by its very nature, depends on unity. It survives not because it rules, but because it represents, because it offers a symbol that all people, regardless of politics or class, can look to as a point of continuity. By removing Archie and Lilibet in such a controversial way, the monarchy fractured that unity. Instead of being a unifying symbol, the crown became a dividing line, forcing people to choose between compassion for children and respect for tradition. The defenders and loyalists, in their fervor, ensured that the decision would not fade quietly into history, but would instead remain a living wound, reopened with every debate about the monarchy's relevance. The human toll of this divide cannot be ignored. For Meghan, watching her children become symbols of controversy must feel like a confirmation of her deepest fears. For Harry, the realization that the monarchy could pit the world against his family is a bitter pill, a reminder of the loneliness he has spoken about so often. And for Archie and Lilibet, though too young to understand now, their names are already etched into the narrative of division, destined to grow up under the shadow of battles they never chose. The chapter closes with the recognition that this divide is not just about one family. It is about what kind of world we want to live in. Should institutions be allowed to protect themselves at any cost, even at the expense of children? Or should compassion override tradition, even if it weakens the crown? Meghan's defenders and palace loyalists will never agree on these answers, but their clash ensures that the story of Archie and Lilibet will be remembered not just as a royal controversy, but as a turning point in the global debate about monarchy itself.